This is the Merged Medical Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff Brown, with my co-host, Dr. Jeff Cole. We're joined today by Dr. David Kay and Gabe Szabo. Gabe is the CEO of Surgical Targeted Solutions. They have a proprietary 3D navigation system designed to improve the accurate placement of implants, reduce complication rates, and reduce OR time. Dr. David Kay is their Chief Medical Officer. Welcome to you both.
Thanks so much for having us.
So give us, if one of you would like to just give us a brief background, understanding that most of our viewers and listeners are physicians, many of them are orthopedists.
Yeah, so I always like to start with the problem. And one of the overarching problems today is how do you create reliability and reproducibility in the operating room? Training can only take you so far. Personal technical skill can only take you so far. And if you look at what we have, either we have mechanical jigs, but with the trouble with a mechanical jig is the first step is a freehand step, or we have robots, or we have navigation systems, and a lot of those are extremely complex and very expensive. The single biggest problem in hospitals and hospital settings is resource constraint through personnel, and we just don't have enough people. Physicians aren't being trained the same way as I can tell looking at you two. Probably went through the same type of training, a lot of volume. That's changed. And if you look at the change in demographics, there's going to be a lot more people who require surgery and a lot less people who are trained to do the surgery. So how do we leverage technology? How do we create a tool that allows for very simple, reliable, reproducible, and affordable? The affordability aspect is really, really important. If you look at the robots for, let's pick on just knee replacement, the data still is not there that says that they're clinically better, but they're very expensive. And the expense comes into the actual purchase of the machine, the implants, as well as the CTs that are required that aren't reimbursed either. So there's a lot of expense in the system through the processes that we have. And really what this intent is to create a very simple system that allows pretty much anybody to identify their three-dimensional target and navigate in 3D. We've gone with hip fractures. Why hip fractures? Say Jeff, because it's easy, but as an anesthesiologist or Jeff as an orthopedic surgeon, there's time constraints. We need to get in, we need to get out. We've got, let's say, a complex intertroche. We don't have a lot of time, and we've got to get it right, and we need to get it right the first time. And it becomes really, really important, again, with an aging population, and less people with training to do it, less OR time availability, less resources in the OR from nurses to sterile processing. We just have to get it done. And so we've selected hip fractures, again, big population, need for it. And we just feel that this device that we have is extremely adaptable to a wide variety of surgical procedures. Again, if you look at the first step, it's a freehand step. So how do we change that freehand step where we're using fluoro, which is really 2D, to navigate in 3D and get it right the first time? So that's really the premise behind all of this. It's been a lot of work. The mathematics is extremely complex. The IP landscape is horrendously crowded, but we actually have free space because the way that we're doing our system. So I'll let Gabe chat from here. So if that gives you a sense of, I always like to start, what is the problem? And then how do we create a solution for the problem? And as opposed to what I typically see, which is there's a solution, but I'm not really sure what the problem is. Or it might be a great solution, but I don't know who's going to pay for it, as well as how do you get trained for doing something really complicated. And remember, when it's really complicated, it's not just us, it's also the OR staff. If it's complex for us, it's complex for the OR staff. And I swear, one of these days, a circulating nurse's head is going to explode in front of me because they're going to be asked to do just one more thing. And it's a problem that's pretty universal. So I'll let Gabe comment on the business side of this.
David, thanks. And so I think David really nicely described the problem. And the solution that we've created is a 3D navigation system that helps take what is, as David had said, a unguided procedure, and we've now converted it into a guided procedure. So we're able to track in real time the surgeon's instrument of choice, and they can then see the advancement of their implant in real time and guide it directly to their targeted location. So they can hit their mark first time, every time through this guidance. Several benefits, such as we can reduce OR time, we can reduce complications. If we think about some of these unguided procedures today, femoral fractures, ACL reconstructions, there are over 26% complication rates, leading to over 180,000 complications per year. So we can reduce complication rates, we can reduce OR time, we can reduce time under anesthesia, reduce the amount of radiation, because what surgeons are doing with that first step today, advance fluoro, advance fluoro.
Mm-hmm.
Where here we can just take 2 orthogonal images at the beginning of the procedure, and then we can guide that surgeon, again, with their instrument of choice, to their target location. So we're excited about the solution and things that it provides benefits to not only surgeons, but patients and the healthcare system.
So you can use any instrument, any kind of nail. It's the surgeon's choice, right?
That's correct. So the system is designed to be universal. We're agnostic to the surgical instrument or the implant, because what we're really doing is we're guiding. We have a calibration step where we set up the surgeon's instrument as well as their implant, and then we can guide them with that instrument, with that implant, right to where they want to get to.
Can you get right? I want to see just technically, like real granular, what exactly the technology is doing. A little more specifics on that.
Yeah, and the math. How did you get to the solution? Who did that work?
Sure. Well, on the math side of it, we're blessed with some really outstanding engineers, and basically what we do, and I'll share an animation that will help show how the system works. What we do is when we take that initial orthogonal images at the beginning portion of the procedure, we implant a fiducial, which is basically a ground truth to the anatomy of interest. And what the system does is it takes those fluoro images and then does a 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional point reconstruction. So with just those 2 initial fluoro shots, where the software is able to then construct a 3-dimensional world based on those 2D images, just those 2 initial orthogonal images. And so, Jeff, that's kind of the math behind it. Our proprietary system does the conversion, creates a 3D world, and then we're able to navigate the surgeon's instrument within that 3D world.
How about those first 2 images? Do they have to be perfectly 90 degrees apart, or perfect AP, perfect lateral, or does the system know how to correct?
It needs to be, in general, a good representation of orthogonal images. But if there's any variance, the software knows that there's a variance, and it will address that variance and still give us the 3D reconstruction.
Okay, that's great.
The first phase of the procedure starts with attaching an instrument holder to the OR table. And here we show the surgeon's instrument of choice. We attach an instrument tracker onto it and then place their instrument into the instrument holder to kind of create a calibration. We then attach a fiducial to the anatomy of interest. Here we're looking at a femur. And the purpose of the fiducial, it allows us to have a ground truth and do the 2D to 3D reconstruction. Then we take 2 orthogonal images, an AP and a lateral image,
Mhm.
And then the surgeon chooses on those images where he or she wants the target location of the implant to be. So after they've chosen where they want to be, the system then does the 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional reconstruction. And so now we can see that based on the anatomy of interest, this is where the 3-dimensional point needs to be in space. So the surgeon now knowing, and they can see on their monitor where they want to get to, we attach a draw wire to the instrument tracker, which allows us to track the instrument in space. And the surgeon advances their instrument, their implant to the desired location. Once they hit the desired location, they've hit their mark first time, every time.
That is super cool. It makes it look like I could do it.
Also, I
You
like
could.
to add, it measures the depth too. So we'll actually know the depth of the screw. As it advances, there's a tracker on the guide wire. So screw wastage isn't as much of an issue. And that makes the CFOs of hospitals pretty happy.
Now you're using just a regular, this is a C-arm that's in every OR.
That's correct.
Yes.
And it's another element, Jeff, that the system is designed to be able to use the C-arm that whatever is presented in the operating room or ambulatory surgery center. So we're agnostic to the C-arm technology.
That's super cool. I have seen the few distals that Medtronic has in brain surgery. I haven't seen anybody use them in orthopedic surgery. How is this different than what's already out there on the market?
Well, in terms of competition, there really are no systems that are designed to do not only image analysis, but also instrument tracking from the type of procedures that we're looking at. You're correct that the use of fiducials have been used very successfully in brain surgery. The idea of a fiducial, again, allows us to do that 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional point reconstruction. And we're repurposing that technology in procedures like David had said, our beachhead procedure, femoral fractures, but this is truly a platform technology. We can use this not only in femoral fractures, hip fractures, we can do sports medicine, we can do spinal procedures, extremities. This is truly a platform technology with the same concept.
I can totally see it used in interventional spine. I'm a pain trained physician, so I can see where neurosurgeons would love this for spine procedures as well.
And while we're not relying on the CT, if a CT is available, sure, we could definitely leverage a CT and add that in. Mentioned for sportsmen, well, for tunnel placement, tunnels are put over guide wires. So if you get the guide wire in the right place, great. If you have it in the wrong place, now your tunnel is off, let's say ACLs. There's just a lot of different applications in the entire body where this could be used, but we have to pick one place. And that's why we've selected to go to hip fractures again, just because these are patients we've got to get in, we need to get out quickly. It needs to be accurate, increasing numbers. I mean, the number that I'm seeing projected, I think 2040 is about 500,000 hip fractures a year. Some of those are going to be replacements, but a lot are going to be intertrochs that are going to need to be fixed. So, we don't see the volume of surgery dropping, but if anything, it's going to go up. But again, we have a resource constrained healthcare system. So how do we move people through effectively and efficiently without breaking the budget and breaking the system? And that's really what we're trying to pay very close attention to. There's a lot we can do. Again, we're going to be collecting a lot of images. You asked about the C-arm. The critical element for the C-arm is it does need to be connected to a PAC system. And a number of C-arms and ASCs actually are not connected to a PAC system. So that's going to be one thing that is important. But that's very routine especially in hospitals and many ASCs.
Yeah. And most of these hip fractures are taking place in the hospital.
Right.
That's right.
Right. Can we do joints? Yes. Are we going to start at joints? No.
Yeah.
So
I'm just thinking of some of those hard screws to place with acetabular fractures or things of that nature.
SI fusions, and the thing is, the windows, as like in an SI fusion, your window is pretty small.
It is.
I mean, you go the wrong way, either way, or too far, too far, you've got a big problem.
Right.
A really, really big problem around the elbow, shoulder, again, anywhere around the pelvis. It's critically important that you stay on target as you're drilling. And if let's say you do your first pass, now you've got a whole track, and trying to change that is difficult. I'm sure, Jeff, anesthesiologist, you're kind of doing a lot of body English when you see somebody trying to struggle. They're like, just a little bit this way, and a little bit that way. And it's like, oh my God, how do I get it? And it's just when you get that wrong track, it's really hard to change it. It is really, really difficult. Sometimes you have to create a new entry point, and that is less than optimum too, because the first time really is your best time.
That's really the premise of what we're bringing here is, how do you get that first placement, that unguided placement, converted to a guided placement and hit that mark the first time, every time? And that's really what the whole premise of the system is. As David highlighted, it's getting that first guide wire right. When you do that, then the rest of the procedure becomes a lot more predictable.
Yeah. I like your branded statement. You've said it a few times, but it makes a lot of sense. A lot of power to that.
How close are you to commercialization?
So right now we are in our development phase. We're actively working on our hardware development, our software development, working with clinicians to identify our user needs. We are focused on getting design lock by the end of 2024. And then as we get into 2025, we'll be conducting our verification and validation work. And our goal is to have submission to the FDA in the first half of 2025. And then with an FDA review in the back half of the year, we look to be in our limited market release in back half of 2025.
And what about marketing and distribution after that?
So what we'll do with our limited market release, we will then leverage a lot of the clinicians that David and Dr. Brian Dan Hartog, our chairman, they have great relationships within the orthopedic community, and we're going to leverage these relationships to validate our sales process and make sure that we have our messaging, the system is doing what it's intended to do. And then once we've completed our successful limited market release, then we'll expand into a full commercialization where we'll add very strategically sales reps in key markets to continue the expansion of our commercial footprint.
I have some connections in that market. When we approach that, we'll circle back.
We will definitely take advantage of those relationships. Thank you.
Well, David, you probably remember Synthes and all of their educational meetings. I don't know if those still take place as much as they used to with all of the changes, but yeah, I think if you put this tool in the hands of residents, they're gonna love it.
It's one of the comments we got back is why are we just showing a standard X or effectively a rifle scope and not showing the animations and showing all this? It's like, well, we could do all that, but we'd rather start with very straightforward, simple, easy to understand because it's easier to train on, less complexity as far as a user interface, but just a very reliable user interface to get people started. Again, there's so much we can build from here, but on launch, we want to make sure it works. I mean, for example, I have a Tesla. Do you guys have Teslas?
No, but my Tesla best buddy just got one yesterday, and this thing is awesome.
Well, so let me tell you something about a Tesla. You can have a beautiful sunny day like I'm sitting right now, and the windshield wipers are going to go flying all over the place. I could be in a downpour, and the wipers, which aren't automatic, nothing, absolutely nothing. So we want certain things to work really well and very reliable before we start adding on. It's hard to trust a car to drive you when it can't even get the wipers right.
Yeah, I agree.
So sometimes we can lean in too far on technology that just isn't there. And in the operating room, we don't have to want to do a whole bunch of restarts. Turn it off, turn it on. Oh my God, unplug this, plug that in. So we really want to keep things very straight, very understandable for everybody, not add too many layers of code onto this, because the code, I think you both have picked on, the math here is complex. And we want to make sure that we can accomplish the goal of, okay, this is where I want this screw to end up, or this is where I want my tunnel to be, or anchor, or whatever it is I'm putting in. I want it to be right here because this is the optimum. Now, the interesting part of it is we will be able to obtain those images, and we can start measuring based upon optimum placement, just what are the clinical results. Again, we're going to be able to collect a lot of very interesting data. We're going to be able to collect hand motion because we're tracking an instrument. So we can see how much somebody's hand is moving.
Right.
And are they going in the right direction or the wrong direction? How often? And one of the things, again, I mentioned joint replacements, how we just don't have great data. Well, if we're talking about putting in fixation, and let's say we're just measuring hand motion, guided and unguided, we can very clearly see how quickly they're going to hit the target. What are their hand motions? What are they going through? It's easy to measure fluoro time. And fluoro time is really important to all of us in the operating room, in the beam, right? Because we have a lead apron on, it's still not protecting your hands all that much. Those gloves don't do too much. So, how do we cut down on fluoro for us? How do we cut down on fluoro for the team and for the patient? A CT, that's a lot of radiation for a patient. And how much additional radiation are we doing just to create this 3D environment if we can get away with minimal radiation for everybody? That becomes really important, as opposed to saying we have a robot that is semi-autonomous that needs all this stuff, but there's cost to it, whether it's dollar cost, radiation cost. How do you manage all of these other things? So that's why we want to start off relatively straightforward. For the user, simple. Again, there's a lot behind it. It's like you pick up a cell phone and you go into an app. Well, there's a lot that's just happened, right? But you don't see it. So that's where we want this to be. And we want it to be really intuitive, because nobody has time to spend days and days training to use something new.
Well, how hard is it to train on this thing? How long does it take someone to learn?
It should, the calibration side, if it takes more than an hour to train somebody, I'd be shocked.
Yeah, they're probably in the wrong specialty.
Probably the one thing to talk about with this, it's process. If you think about where's the biggest gains to be made in healthcare, it's really in process. Why do we do what we do? A lot of times we do it because it's a ritual. Leveraging technology to change the process is really where I think things need to happen, to simplify the process, to make it easier for everybody, from the OR staff to the materials handler, because they don't have as much stuff to worry about, to the patient. If you want to hit everybody, time invested to learn to do something new. If you're going to go learn something new and take that time to learn how to do it, you want to make sure that that's a very steep learning curve. Steep is good. Steep learning curve is what you want, because it's little time in and you get a lot out. So you want that steep learning curve so that, boy, I got it right away. And gee, look at this. I'm in and out of the room. We're not getting paid more when we do our procedures. Right. So we have a lot of financial incentive to get it done right, and get in and get out, and go to that 30-minute, not the 2-hour.
One topic that I wanted to just touch upon is that if we look at orthopedic surgeons in the next 5 years, we're anticipating that there's going to be a large increase in the amount of retirements during that time period.
Right.
And as such, there's going to be an influx of new surgeons coming in. And where we really think there's going to be a huge advantage for surgical targeted solutions is helping with those early stage surgeons as they're developing their skills, their capabilities, their techniques, bringing a technology that helps them enhance their capabilities and technologies. That's going to be one area, one target that we're going to really focus on. And the second is, how do we advance the capabilities of the rural and community hospitals where you might have a surgeon that's not necessarily doing as many of these types of procedures on a day in, day out basis. They're a jack of all trades. They do many things, but how do we help them with that 2 o'clock in the morning femoral fracture call? How do we help them hit that target first time, every time? So we're really here to help upskill those early surgeons and help those surgeons that aren't necessarily doing procedures like a trauma one center does every day, day in, day out. One of our strategies is that we are planning on developing the system so that actually it is not only a surgical navigation system, it's a training navigation system.
Yeah.
And the surgeons can then train on sawbones. They can advance, again, their own instrument with our technology. So we clearly plan on having this as a training tool that will make available to training institutions, and that'll be part of our commercialization process.
What about, and this is probably down the road, but a lot of people we have on the podcast, everything's revolving around data, AI, et cetera. I mean, everything. And the Da Vinci robots are recording these surgical movements, the movements of the surgeon, et cetera. And it's all getting funneled into a big system. Have you guys thought much down the road of how that data in your system might be monetized?
So I think David has done a great job explaining that we want to start off very focused and ensure that we're solving the problem. The problem is, how do we get accuracy, reduce complications, reduce OR time, reduce fluoro time? And so as we've worked with the FDA, we've done a couple of pre-submissions with them. We've aligned on what we need to provide to the FDA in order to achieve the delivery of the things I just described. Once we're in market, that's where I think our opportunity is, where we can be collecting that data in the background, still achieving our objective, but collecting the data so we can come back to the FDA with enhancements in terms of, as David described, we can be measuring hand movements and improved outcomes economically. But we want to be very purposeful and focused with our initial submission, but we will build on that in the future.
Dr. K, what do you think an experiment would look like if you had two residents in a busy hospital fixing hip fractures, and one had this tool from the beginning and one didn't? And in a year, you took this tool away. Which one do you think could find the center spot better? Do you think it's the one that's learned where his hands need to be with the aid of this, or the one that's kind of made mistakes and figured it out the hard way?
Well, I think if we learn from the virtual reality training, we know people do get better training with virtual reality. The problem I have with virtual reality is you have no sensory feedback. You really can't feel it. With this, you do have sensory feedback. If you're not in the bone, you're going to learn you're not in the bone. Whereas with your training on VR, you really can't feel anything. You just go through a hand motion exercise and sequence of doing the procedure. I think the person who actually uses it will probably be better even without it. But the other component is, can we afford as a healthcare system to have somebody, with screws all over the place, and with the complications related screws all over the place? And I never watched golf. It was just happened to be on, but I saw one of the golfers yesterday on the Memorial shot a 42 in the back nine. So you've got an elite pro golfer who just totally blew up. Well, nobody likes talking about this, but even surgeons will have bad days where it's like, I can't hit anything. Most of the time it's, boy, I get it pretty much every single time. But some days it's, wow, it's a bad, what is going on with, just like that pro golfer. And by having this device, we eliminate it. One of the venture capital folks that I work with has been really interested in robotics and navigation. And he said, he's youngish, he's probably late 40s, early 50s. He said, I'm going to need a total knee. And I don't want the surgeon doing my knee replacement to have a bad day. I want to make sure that they don't have a bad day. And I think that's what patients want. That's what hospital administrators want. They want to be able to predict and know that if Dr. X does an operation, it's going to take him 30 minutes. If Dr. J does an operation, it's going to take her 30 minutes. They can't have somebody taking 30 and somebody taking 2 or 3 hours, because how do you staff for that? That is the single biggest problem, is staffing. How do you staff when that time in the OR is so variable? So I would think that this is going to actually have a lot of appeal for hospital administrators. I mean, that's different. Again, not to mention cutting down on implant wastage, because you put the wrong size in, or it's in the wrong location. You look at the AP and then you swing to a lateral. It's like, oh my God, now what do I do? Because it's just in the wrong place. Yeah. So that I think becomes part of the reality of this. Not so much, it's a selling point, but I think it's just the reality of healthcare. How do you keep everything consistent? I don't like using the word, but I'll use it. Democratize. How do you cut down on different skill levels and the variability in skill from the same person? And I think that's where things really come in. And then patients are going to feel a lot better knowing that, hey, this is how it's done. I'm sure you've been asked by a patient, does she have a good night's sleep?
Right. Oh, all the time.
Yeah, all the time. They're concerned about that. And if you say, well, look, I've got some extra help with these new tools, and they're going to go, oh, I feel better now.
Well, I can see from an anesthesiologist, reduced OR time, especially in a hip fracture population, is great, right? And certainly they're not getting any younger with the hip fractures, and we're going to be doing more going forward. Has there been any preliminary studies on how much, this really saves in terms of cost and OR turnover time, reduction in time? It seems like a no-brainer, and it would. But if you're in front of an administrator, what hard data do you guys already have that shows what it does in terms of, cutting down complication, cutting down OR time, et cetera?
So that's the work that we're actually in process of developing. As I mentioned earlier, we have alignment with the FDA in terms of what testing we need to demonstrate in order to get our clearance. And as part of our work that we've agreed to do with the FDA, we will be capturing the improved accuracy of placement of implants, the time to achieve the accurate placement, and therefore we'll be able to demonstrate reduction in misses, improvement in accuracy, reduction in time, and then we'll also capture the reduction in overall radiation that both the staff, the patient, as well as the surgeon experience. So that'll all be captured as part of our development work.
I love it.
Kind of thinking about that FDA application, kind of moving backwards. I mean, what's the risk that you would spend more time in the OR, or the risk of any of these going the other direction? I mean, I just can't see, because you're putting an implant in that's already standard of care. I just think you just have to do the work to
prove it, but it would be easy, right?
Mm-hmm. It's forward. And I think something that David highlighted earlier needs to be really emphasized. We are leveraging the existing clinical workflow of the surgeon. We're not asking them to do things that they don't typically do in a procedure. It's their instrument, it's their hand, it's their implants. And what we're really doing is we're giving them that additional data to go from unguided to guided. It's not like we're taking the instrument out of their hands and introducing a robotic servo. And then how do I work with something that I don't feel the procedure anymore, that tactile feedback? We're working with the existing clinical workflow, which is really exciting from a surgeon perspective.
How about IP protection and patents? Is that something that's possible or you're working on?
So Dave mentioned earlier that it's a crowded IP landscape. We already have an issued patent. We have 4 IP families that we are currently working on. And as we continue to go through our development process, we're continually adding new claims and new IP protection as we go. But we've already carved out intellectual property space. So we have protection, we have freedom to operate, and that is a critical part of our development process.
So the podcast has had so many great ideas, and where so many, I think, have hit a wall in terms of success has been in wide scale commercialization. Now, I read a little bit about each of your backgrounds. You both have extremely successful careers. Tell us about yourselves and how you see getting wide scale commercialization. What's the plan? And this is your opportunity. I want to put the spotlight on you and highlight your talents and why our members would invest with your company.
Well, I'll jump in. I've been in the healthcare space for over 30 years, and I've been on the startup side of the business as well as on the large strategic side. I've run multi-billion-dollar organizations with Ethicon Endosurgery competing against Da Vinci robot. But I've also then been in startups that have had to develop from the bottom up. So I've seen kind of both sides of the business. From that vantage point, I feel really confident about what our commercialization strategy is and how we will take advantage of the network of orthopedic surgeons that David and Brian bring to us, and taking that network of clinicians. How do we take this value proposition that is a solid value proposition? How do we get access through the value analysis committees so that we are now within the organizations of the hospitals? And then how do we drive penetration based on that access? So our goal is very methodical. We're going to go into a limited market release. We're going to learn. Based on our learnings, we'll then expand our commercial efforts, and our progression into market will be a very thoughtful process based on data, and then continue to expand. David?
Yeah, when you talk about the commercialization, unfortunately, the primary driver is, what does it cost? That's always the first question.
Right.
What's this going to cost? And if you compare us to robots, a typical robot's going to be a cost is $250,000 to $1 million. We're nowhere even. It's not even going to be close. I mean, right now, the monitor that we're currently going to be using, eventually switch over to an AR headset, but right now it's a monitor.
David, to your point about we're orders of magnitude less than those. We can state what their price is, but we're orders of magnitude less.
Yep. I'm just asking the question because this is where everybody gets hung up. You can have such a great idea, and you do. I mean, this is really good, and it's very investable, but how do you get it nationwide, worldwide? Because that's where the real money is. And if your fractions of cost of what's currently available, way better, reduce complications rates, reduce OR time, it's sounding really good. I want to talk, we can be careful about this as well, but I want to talk some numbers. I'm sure you're in some phase of a funding round. This is what we're about. We want to invest in good companies, take this back to our members. Just speak about whatever you're able to speak about in terms of funding, capitalization, revenue projections, et cetera.
So from a funding perspective, as I said earlier, we're early stage. We're in our seed round. And what we are looking for is a convertible note for investors. We're looking to raise with this convertible note up to $5 million. And high level perspective on the note, it's going to be 8% interest, 15% discount, 24-month to maturity note. So straightforward terms. To date, we've raised almost $1 million from our existing cap table, which are orthopedic surgeons. So we're blessed that we have a lot of fundamental alignment in our technology, and our orthopedic surgeons are responding by putting their own money into the company, but we are looking to expand with our convertible
What's the
note.
valuation and cap on that note?
Right now, our valuation cap is $12 million.
So you're saying a 15% discount to the next round?
To the next round, in the equity round, that's right. And to your point, our goal is that this seed round, the intent and use of proceeds is to take us to FDA submission. Once we get to FDA submission, then we'll go into an equity round, which will fund the commercialization.
I got you.
And you've had attorneys look at the physician's investment and Stark and those type issues, and should be fine.
Oh, we're rock solid there.
Yeah, I wouldn't perceive anything, so that's good.
Do you have a minimum entry point?
Our minimum investment is $250,000 investment. However, with the right investor, we can work opportunities based on what the investment is looking like.
One thing we try to do collaborative investing to bring our minimums down. So that's one thing I'd ask, if we talk amongst the members, maybe we come with 250,000, but from 10 different people. It would dirty your cap table up, but you'd get the money. And we've done that a few times as well.
And, we could create a SPV for that, and so that you get a singular entity on the cap. We're very open to those opportunities. I think the most important part is to get the right investor, especially with your community, that they understand the problem, they realize what we're bringing, and those are the kind of investors we're really interested in connecting with.
Well, I definitely see the synergy. I mean, Jeff Cole is a bigger part of this than even me. So a lot of his connections are obviously orthopedists. So I think this fits like hand in glove with what we're doing.
Yeah, no doubt.
Jeff, you can easily see this on a hand surgery, right?
I'm trying to think through the hand part. So many of what we do in hand surgery, trauma, there's a lot of things. It's just never the same. So even wrist fractures, I'm not sure. But then I'm trying to think that surgery in the hands of somebody who's in training or early in their career. The examples I was thinking of were, we've mentioned, acetabulum, SI joint, just those tricky places.
So one of the cases that it wasn't me. It was one of my partners doing hand surgery, putting a scaphoid screw in. The radiology tech came in and said, kind of shaking his head. I'm like, well, what happened? It was 25 minutes of fluoro time to put the guide wire in and eventually get a screw in for a scaphoid. I thought, oh man, that's a long time.
The scaphoid might be honestly one of the better better use cases in the hand and wrist. And then I'm trying to think through elbow. I mean, gosh, the problem with elbow is the pieces they're widely displaced, and so you're not working from a stable. I'm not sure where your starting point would be. Working from stable to unstable.
Thinking about supracondylar fractures in kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And Dr. K, we got sidetracked a little bit. Can you tell me your background and some of the other projects you've been involved with? Were very interesting, some of those.
Yes. So orthopedic surgeon, foot and ankle fellowship a long time ago, back when nobody was doing foot and ankle work. And I started off really academic and looking at a lot of different types of fixation techniques because they hadn't been worked out. And that really served as the background for a company that I started called Orthohelix. And that's back when nobody was doing anything for distal extremities. It's just like, I'll just use the big old Synthes, small fragment main screws, and that'll work for you. And well, it really doesn't. And so started this company that really focused on distal extremities. Even though we did have a clavicle plate and some other plates, but it was more small bone fixation, and that eventually got acquired a couple of times, and now it's ended up at Stryker. Then the other two companies that I currently have, one is called Vero Ankle or Rubber City Bracing, and it's a complete redesign on ankle braces. It's a dynamic device as opposed to the current static devices. Controls edema. It controls motion within a range, and it's a modular device as opposed to current ankle braces. And ankle injuries, ankle sprains alone are about 4 million a year. We throw fractures, we're probably another good 750,000. So a lot of injuries, and there's been very little change in bracing for decades now. So that we've been working on, and we actually, again, it's similar to this. This is also a modular device and has multiple applications that we can build upon. Then the next one is called Resavant, and this is a new skin adhesive. And the skin adhesive, and Gabe has been very helpful on this one from his position working at Closure and Ethicon. This skin adhesive, we're in the final stages of FDA submission and approval, which should be end of third quarter, fourth quarter, what we're looking like. It has silicone built into the formulation. Can't go into the details on that, but it's a whole new applicator, and the silicone changes the material characteristics of the cyanoacrylate considerably. And as we all know, that is the biggest market because every surgery has a skin incision to go with it.
Right.
And back to people, how they're being trained. If you look at training currently, it's usually done by industry, and they're selling implants. They're not selling wound closure, but you got to close up the incision. And again, you want to close it up quickly. You want to get it done right. We're looking at what we can do to eliminate the follow-up visit for probably the most feared visit of all from patients, which is suture removal.
Mm-hmm.
And where you have something that actually you can just peel right off. And it is a different formulation. It's the first new skin adhesive in 25-ish years.
And what's the name? What was the name of that company and the product again?
Yeah, the product is called Cutiva, and then the company, Cutiva.
Got it.
And then the company is called Resavant, and the other one is Rubber City Bracing, and the website or the name of the brace is called the Vero Ankle. And if you go to the website, you'll probably see some recognizable names who helped on the design on the ankle brace. We're all friends. We've all known each other. We have pretty much all stars. We just said, look, bracing is not keeping up with our surgery.
Yeah.
And the rigid devices just are no go. People don't like them. They don't want to wear them. And then the canvas, people don't like those. Canvas and shoelaces. It's like, okay, we can do better. The commonality between all three of these they're massive markets, and they've been pretty much ignored. To Gabe's point, you're asking about where we go. Really, nobody's doing this. Everybody's just focusing on joint replacement primarily, and complex spine secondarily.
Right.
There's a lot more that we do, and it's almost all freehand. And especially the step one is freehand. So if a lot of the jigs work pretty well, but that first step's got to be done right, and then you can build off of it. So if you can't get the first step part done, then you've got a problem for the whole procedure. Everything's off, and then it's not a good day in the operating room.
Well, this is a good project, and I always say you guys check mark all of our boxes. It helps physicians do their jobs. It helps patients improve their outcomes of their own individual, procedures. And this is an investable project. So that's everything we want here. I'll just summarize by saying Surgical Targeted Solutions offers a 3D navigation system designed to improve accuracy, decrease complications, decrease OR time, and make it far easier for surgeons to do their jobs. I love it. It's Emerge Medical Podcast. I'm Dr. Jeff Brown with my co-host, Dr. Jeff Cole, with Gabe Szabo and Dr. David Kay. Thanks, guys, for coming in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.